Hey, welcome to the Empowered and Free podcast. My name is Erin Kimbrell, and I'm a counselor, certified life coach, breathwork coach, and small town mom of two. I know firsthand what it feels like to live with high functioning anxiety. For most of my life, I had so much mental mess, anxiety, people pleasing, perfectionism, overthinking, constant worrying, and never feeling good enough. On my decade-long journey to feeling better, I've learned how to take back my life from high-functioning anxiety and helped others to do the same through my coaching and breathwork programs. Now I want to share everything I know with you. This podcast will help you feel empowered over your high-functioning anxiety and free to finally live the life of your dreams. Now, grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and dive into the episode. I'm Erin Kimbrell, and this is the Empowered and Free podcast. Hey, friend. Welcome back to the Empowered and Free podcast. Today, we've got a good one, but I have a confession to make. So in today's episode, we are talking about how to stop overthinking and what have I done with this episode but overthink. I've been planning this episode for weeks. Weeks ago, I posted on my Instagram stories and asked you guys what you wanted to hear. This was the episode that won. And ever since then, I have been writing out this episode, researching, planning, of course, adding everything that helps me with overthinking, kind of going even deeper into overthinking. And then I go, what am I even doing but overthinking this exact episode? And it's because I care about it a lot. I want this to be a resource that you can come to help you, right? Not only in realizing when you're overthinking, but what to do when you're overthinking. That's my goal. But I had to tell myself so many of the things I'm going to teach you today throughout the episode. So I will point this out as we move through. My goal today is to do this in one take. I am not editing. So if you hear me say something, pause, say it again in a different way, just know that this is me working through my own overthinking. I appreciate you being here and just taking me as I am. So that's what we're talking about today, how to stop overthinking. All of us do it, whether we're replaying awkward moments from like 10 years ago or stressing over things that we're totally not in control of. Overthinking is so draining. Take it from me, who's been stressing a little bit about this episode for weeks. Okay. So we're going to break down today not only why we overthink, but how it affects us. And of course, you know, guys, I'm always going to share the practical tips, ways that we can stop overthinking. So go ahead and get your coffee. I already had mine, and let's dive into the episode. So we're going to first start with 5 reasons why you overthink. Also know that I will have an entire deep dive, basically a masterclass on how to stop overthinking inside of the Haven as soon as those doors open up. For today, I'm going to try to keep it as brief as I can with just the 5 reasons why you overthink and then 5 tips to stop overthinking, but really getting into the meat of the overthinking. We'll talk about that at the very end of the episode. Getting to the deep reasons that we overthink, that is what is going to be key to help you. Okay, so let's start off today with just kind of high level. Why are we doing this and what can we do instead? I'm going to share examples in each of these practical things that you might find yourself doing. Okay, so number 1 reason that we overthink is, of course, anxiety, right? Worry, fear, us stressing about things that are coming in the future. So here's an example of what this would look like. Maybe your boss sends you an email or notification that he wants you to come in for a meeting. Okay, what happens? Like, you immediately start thinking of all the things that you've done wrong. What could you have done wrong? You're worried about getting in trouble, getting written up, or worse, like getting fired. And then your mind goes, well, how am I going to tell my family? I'm not going to be able to afford my car anymore or my house. Your mind immediately spirals from a simple meeting to I'm getting fired. I'm not going to be able to survive. I'm not going to live, right? This is exactly what happens when we are overthinking because of anxiety, worry, or fear. This is also called rumination. Maybe you've heard that term if you've done counseling or therapy or done any of your own kind of self-help work. And this is just when we have one thought and we just tend to spiral and kind of come back to this thought over and over. And rumination, of course, has a big part to play in anxiety, but also even in depression because we're just stuck on this thought and we kind of keep coming back to it over and over again. So, why do we do this? Why do we ruminate? Why do we overthink from a place of anxiety? It really is all about safety. You are doing this as a safety mechanism to protect yourself from something bad that's happened in the past, right? Like maybe you had a really bad experience where something happened and took you by surprise and you didn't feel like you handled that situation well, or you felt like you weren't prepared. And so what did this teach you? That taught you that if you don't think enough, right? Like when a surprise happens, then you're not able to handle that well. So you learned that you need to always prepare. You need to always be thinking about what could happen, planning out scenarios, having everything situated. I remember when I was struggling the most with my anxiety, I really hated surprises. I really hated a last minute change of plans. I kind of wanted to know what we were doing, wanted the itinerary. I was talking to my friend Courtney. We went on a beach trip recently and we were talking about how I used to be like that so much, and my husband's family was not like that. They would just be like willy-nilly doing whatever on vacation. And I'm like, no, like we need a plan. Because I was so structured, so rigid. I called myself a control freak. Maybe you can relate to that. I don't mean that in a mean way, but I just felt like I needed everything planned out. And this was a safety mechanism for me. Okay. If you have struggled with overthinking and anxiety, you might catch yourself staying up overnight or all night, kind of replaying conversations, just kind of hearing that play out. What should I have done? Should I have said something differently? Oh, I wish I would have said that, right? Or maybe you find that you're planning out what if situations that can happen. These start with what if. What if this happens? What if this happens? I'll do this if this happens, okay? Or maybe you find yourself just completely worrying about the future, thinking about yourself 1 year down the road, 10 years down the road, 30 years down the road. I can definitely struggle with that sometimes, trying to plan out not only my future, but my kids' future. What's that going to look like? And kind of get kind of caught up in that, like, let's breathe. That is just the overthinking cycle. I know it all too well, and it sounds like you probably do too. And again, a lot of this overthinking and anxiety is rooted in uncertainty. Okay, so now you know where some of that comes from. Next, let's talk about perfectionism. That is reason number two that we overthink, and it is perfectionism, which is another big one that I just shared with this podcast episode. This is a perfect example. I'm like, oh, what a great idea. People would love this, right? I would love to help people with this. And then what do I do but start perfecting the episode? Okay. Research, deep diving, tweaking, adding, just changing it so many times because I wanted it to be perfect. Again, like the perfect thing for you. But when I really sat with that, I'm like, why am I trying to make it perfect? I want this to be something that is helpful to you. But I also realized once I kind of took a minute and thought about it, one podcast episode probably won't completely stop or erase a lifetime of overthinking. Again, I'm a good example of that. Like, I know all of these things, and there's a difference in knowing and putting into practice, which is exactly why I created the Haven so that we can practice these things together. You can implement these things. You don't just know these things. Google can tell you a lot of these things, but you're actually learning how to put them into practice and get to the deeper work that's there. Okay. So, perfectionism is very real and it is a facade. Okay. It is just completely an illusion. It is something in your mind that goes, hey, if this was perfect, right, you would be good enough, or things would be exactly as you want them. Again, coming back to that control. So I just want to remind you here that searching for that perfect solution or that perfect answer, if you've got that problem in your life and you're just trying to like perfectly fit it in like a puzzle, that is paralyzing. Life is not a puzzle. Life is life and life gets lifey. So it doesn't have that perfect fit just like a puzzle. Again, it is such an illusion. It is not even realistic. Life doesn't have those perfect answers. I used to do a lot of this also by planning my life out years in advance, like plotting out every single detail perfectly. And that is just not possible because life doesn't always go to plan. Things change, and that is okay. So, perfectionism is something that can definitely hold you back and keep you stuck in those cycles of overthinking. So, that was number two. Let's move on to the third reason that you struggle with overthinking. Oh, this is a big one I struggled with too. I struggled with all these, let's be real, but this was a big one, and maybe you can relate to this as well. Number three is self self-doubt. So here's what this could look like in your life. Let's say you have a big decision that you need to make and you go, okay, I know I want to do this, but you start second guessing yourself, right? You go like, do I really know enough? Is that true? Is that right? Like, who else should I ask? I need someone else's opinion. I need a lot of opinions because I don't trust my own. That's that self-doubt coming in. Maybe you even get out and start making that pros and cons list. Guilty. Um, Instead of just trusting yourself and your gut, you know what you want to do and sticking with this. Again, I see this a lot in clients too. I draw very similar clients to myself because like our brains work the same and we get each other. And I've had clients that have come to me and said, like, I know that I need to quit this job. I know that I need to end this marriage or relationship. Like, I know I need to maybe set some boundaries or even cut off some relationships with my family, but they're doubting themselves. Is that the right thing to do? I feel like it, but I'm also really questioning. Okay. So doubting yourself, believing that other people know better, this leads to a lot of indecision and inaction. We freeze. We're just like stuck. We're overwhelmed. We don't know what to do, even though we do know what to do, but we just don't want to trust ourselves. Okay. So that needing that constant kind of reassurance from other people or validation, even can come back to self-doubt, which is reason number 3 that we overthink. Okay. Reason number 4 that we overthink is people pleasing. So very similar to what we just talked about, but here's a good example of people pleasing. Let's say you text your friend and they don't text you back. So you text them again and you still don't hear back. You text them again and you still don't hear back. And you're going like, are they mad at me? Like, did I do something wrong? Okay. Or maybe another example, you walk past a coworker and they don't even look your way. You know, they probably saw you, right? Your mind starts playing on these little games like, they saw you. Why didn't they look at you? Or they didn't smile at you. They didn't say hey or good morning. I wonder, what did I do to them? You assume somehow in these situations that you're at fault. And then your mind gets hooked on it and you're just overthinking that, playing it out in your head a million times, repeating that. You just desperately want to make it better, right? You want to fix the problem. We love to fix things, don't we? Again, so unreal. Okay. So, worrying about other people's opinions can lead to a lot of this unnecessary mental exhaustion. You're playing this impossible game because we can't control the reaction of others. Okay. It is not our responsibility to be in charge of other people's emotions. We have no idea what's going on in all of our friends' lives. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're as overwhelmed and drowning as a lot of us feel, right? They don't have the capacity to answer back. It doesn't necessarily mean it had anything to do with you. Maybe your coworker was so in her own head when she passed you, she didn't even like think about or register that it was you. We cannot control other people. Even if you have done something to upset that other person, it's not our responsibility to be in charge of how they feel. Like I just said, their emotions, their reactions, that is not your responsibility. But that can feel like a lot to somebody who's struggling with people pleasing. And again, I get it. I live most of my life people pleasing. Okay. So I just want you to remind yourself that you can't control how other people feel. You can only control yourself. And that's why you have to show up for you, which you're doing by listening to this episode. So props to you. That was reason number 4 that we overthink. And the last reason we overthink here is a strong inner critic. So this could be you if you catch yourself replaying your mistakes over and over. Maybe it's a mistake from today. Maybe it's a mistake from 10 or 20 years ago, right? But you just catch yourself again ruminating, kind of going over that over and over. And every time you think about it, you're beating yourself up. You're thinking, this is what I did wrong, or this is what I should have done or should have said. And you are just knocking yourself out. Okay. If you're constantly hard on yourself, it's time to change that, right? It's time to shift that dialogue and the things that you're telling yourself in your mind, because your inner voice can be your biggest cheerleader. It doesn't have to be your worst enemy. I used to say that when I was overthinking, I could beat myself up way harder than anybody else possibly could. All right. And we don't want that. Instead, we want to learn how to shift. First, we shift into more of a neutral voice, and then we can shift into more of like that cheerleader, best friend kind of energy. It is so possible from somebody who definitely struggled with criticism and being really hard on myself. So we want to practice self-compassion and know that being good enough is more than enough. That is that sense of relief that you can get. Again, we'll talk about some of those at the end here when I tell you what getting to the deeper reason of overthinking can look like. All right. So that was 1 through 5, 5 reasons that you struggle with overthinking in the first place. I would love to know how many of those you struggle with. If you're all five, like I was, again, sending you love. And I'm glad you're here because I'm hopeful this is so helpful. So now let's get into the practical, the real, the what do you do from here? Aaron, please help me. Let's break it down. All right. Step number one in the 5 tips to stop overthinking is awareness. Okay, I know that is kind of an elusive term, but being aware, paying attention, and noticing what is going on. If you're anything like me, we run 1,000,000 miles a minute. We're doing 20 things at one time sometimes, which I am so not good at, right? I do one thing well, and that is it. I'm not a multitasker, but just taking a minute and actually noticing what's going on, recognizing when you're in a cycle of overthinking, when your thoughts kind of keep looping back to that same thing over and over before you go, oh, interesting. That thought keeps coming up. I've thought that 5 times today. The crazy thing about our brains is that 95% of what we think, that's just recycled thoughts from the day before. When I learned that statistic, I was like, surely this can't be true. But it absolutely is true. Okay. So you just have to pay attention, becoming aware of when the thoughts that you're having aren't actually working for you. And here's why. Your brain pays more attention to what you focus on. All right. That's how the brain works. What you pay attention to, you get more of. Think of it as your For You page on TikTok or on Instagram. I can't even remember what it is when you go to the search, right? That page that's there, things that you've been searching or thinking about are often kind of popping up on that page, especially if you watch like a video or two about it. That's the same way your brain is. Your brain is wired to pay more attention to things that you've been paying attention to. What I tell my clients is where your attention goes, your energy flows. Okay, that's kind of like a woo-woo little nice thing that that I like to say. But here's a real example. I like to give you the woo, but then I also like to give you the practical because I'm kind of a balance of both. When I was looking for a new car several years ago, I really thought I wanted a Jeep Wrangler. If you know me, you know that I love sunshine and the beach and riding with my windows down. Maybe you don't know that about me, but I just love to do that. Like wind in my hair kind of feel my favorite thing. And so I'm like, okay, Jeep Wrangler. I'm going to be a Jeep girl. What do you think I started to see every single time I was on the road? A Jeep Wrangler. I'm like, oh my gosh, all these people own Jeep Wranglers, right? No, that is not, I mean, yes, they do. But the truth is, hundreds of Jeep Wranglers didn't just start like being driven when I started looking around for them, especially in my itty bitty super small town, right? But I just started to notice them now. When I started looking for them, I saw them everywhere. And that's exactly how your brain goes. When you start looking for something or you focus on that or you pay attention to that thing, you notice more of that thing. So here is where this can kind of not be so great when we're feeling anxious. If you have an anxious thought, and then you freak out or you get really worked up about that thought, your brain goes, oh, this is really important. This is that Jeep Wrangler. But instead, it's this really anxious thought, this thing we're super worried about happening. Okay. And your brain starts paying attention to every time you have that thought or you have any evidence that that thought could be true. Okay. Your RAS in your brain, your reticular activating system actually does this for you, which our brains are so smart and we can use them for good. I would love to tell you more about that inside of the Haven. It's like I get so excited talking about that. Okay. So you feel like that anxious thought is happening more and more and more when in reality, it's just that you're paying attention to them. Okay. Again, hundreds of Jeep Wranglers didn't just show up on the day that I wanted one. They had been there, but I wasn't paying attention to them. I was just like driving to my next destination, just doing my own thing. Okay. So, how do we do this? How do we become aware of what's going on, especially if you're somebody, again, who's running 1,000,000 miles a minute? We do the opposite of that. Okay. We just practice being a little more mindful throughout the day. Now, if you're like, okay, that's fantastic, and my to-do list doesn't stop, then I get you, seriously. So set aside 5 minutes a day to do this, 2 minutes a day, 1 minute a day. How much time could you just take to pause? Okay. So maybe you find a meditation app that can walk you through that, or maybe you join the Haven when the doors open up, because I'm going to have so many practices in there that will help you do exactly that. For me, I struggled with meditation, especially as an overthinker, because my mind was just like going, going, going 1,000,000 miles a minute. And I felt like a failure because I couldn't like slow my mind down and quiet my thoughts. Turns out I just wasn't using things that were helpful. for how my brain works. So my goal inside the Haven is to provide you with videos and audios and all these amazing things that are actually going to help you because our brains work alike. So I get it. So again, start with just a few minutes. You don't have to quiet your mind. You just want to simply notice the thoughts that are there. If you are more of a writing girly, then grab you a journal. I've got one right here. Write down your thoughts, just like a brain dump. Okay. I love to do a brain dump, especially when I'm feeling really overwhelmed or my mind has a million thoughts. Maybe you're not into writing. That is okay too. What else could you do to kind of get it out, to express yourself? So maybe you love things like art therapy. Maybe you like to create art or painting or drawing. I want you to just let go of any expectations you have about what this should look like and just get the thoughts out of your head. That is awareness, just noticing what is going on in your mind, okay? Another thing you can do with awareness is by just noticing in the moment, okay, and kind of labeling that thought. Oh, I'm kind of stressed about the whole, like, let's go back to the coworker situation. I'm kind of stressed thinking like she's mad at me. I'm overthinking. Look at that. Look at me kind of worrying or analyzing or replaying that thought over and over. That is awareness. And awareness is the first step. My clients would tell you I say that all the time because it is so true. Awareness is the first step to breaking free from your anxiety. So good. Okay. I also want you to notice here as you're practicing awareness when you're overthinking the most. Is it a certain time of the day? Is it that you're doing a certain activity? For me, it's often working. When things have to do with my work life, I tend to overthink because I really can get stuck in that perfectionism trap a little bit more. Okay, because I want to prove how good I am and I just want to show everybody, and it has to be perfect, right? I can never make a mistake. So that's for me what I've noticed. And then it becomes easier to catch myself in that. Is this for you? Are you overthinking when you don't have enough sleep or when you haven't eaten enough? Okay. Are you triggered by not feeling good enough or feeling like you don't know enough? That's another pattern that comes up for me. And then I start to overthink. Okay. So just notice for you what that looks like. Maybe when you start to overthink, again, awareness is key and awareness is the first step. All right. So that was step number one. That was the longest, I promise. The other steps are a little bit, I would say shorter, maybe even simpler. Okay. So step number two on the steps to stop overthinking are asking yourself, is this actually helpful? Is this actually helpful? Okay. When we're overthinking, we're all up here. We're totally in our head. Just like I mentioned earlier, we learn to solve problems in our mind. We learn to think and overthink so that we could be prepared, so that we could be safe, right? And so when we're doing that, we're planning everything out. But what happens here is that we become really confused. We confuse problem solving and overthinking. They kind of become intertwined. And we're like, oh, I don't even know the difference anymore. So let me separate the two for you now. Problem solving is when you think of a practical solution to the problem and you move on. Okay. For example, you lose your phone, right? I thought I had my phone, but I was going to show you. You lose your phone and you're like, what am I going to do? You're going to retrace your steps until you find your phone. Think about where I was and then find it. Okay. That is it. You're not going to sit there and overthink about your phone. I do have it right here. Okay. Next, that's problem solving. Overthinking is when you get caught in this loop of just negative thoughts. And this is as a way to feel in control or as a way to feel prepared over something that is typically outside of our control. Okay. So a story for me, I told you guys I loved planning things, right? When I was in grad school to become a counselor, I remember I started my first semester. I'm in class with Dr. Strange. That was my professor's name. He's awesome. I love Dr. Strange. And he was like, okay, what do you guys want to do? You know, he's kind of going around the room. And I go into this full spiel of my entire 6 semesters of classes, not only what classes I'm going to take and when, the internships that I'm going to take and when, which it doesn't work like that, by the way. You're not guaranteed any internships. And even then, where I would want to have a job. That's where my mind goes. And I just blur all this out and I can see him like, huh, okay. I don't know. That's not what he asked for, but that's what he got because in my head, I'm thinking, I have to control this because that feels better than feeling like Who knows where I'll end up? And this is where we can kind of get stuck in the overthinking. I was not problem solving there. I didn't have a problem and I solved it. I just started overthinking and planning everything out that really, again, wasn't realistic, like I talk about. Okay. So it feels like a lot of times we're solving the problem, but I actually wasn't. It was just causing me more anxiety in the long run because I'm like, this is a plan. The plan has to stay the plan. And if it doesn't, I might lose it. Okay. So I want you to practice recognizing when you're really problem solving versus when you're ruminating and kind of overthinking things that are beyond your control. That is the difference between the two. Asking yourself, is it actually helpful? Because overthinking is not helpful in the way that you want. It is not truly helping you solve the problem. It is just making you focus more on that instead of making a decision and moving on. So number two is asking yourself, is it actually helpful? Number three is to validate your feelings. I'm always going to say this, validate, validate, validate. This is a huge part of my PNR method that I help you work through the thoughts in your mind, validating how you feel because so many of us can be really mean to ourselves, just point blank. So we're going to accept how our mind works and work with it, not against it. Okay. Instead of completely fighting your thoughts, we're going to acknowledge your thoughts. Okay, self-compassion is what is the name of the game here. This is what we got to learn. And not only are you treating yourself like a best friend, but you're saying things like, it's okay that I feel this way. So I love to say things like that. Mantras are affirmations that say, it's okay, I'm safe. That's just anxiety. That's just me overthinking, which that kind of grounds and separates you from the feelings that you have or from the thoughts that you have. You are not the same. You are not your anxiety. You are not your overthinking. You are separate. That is something you experience. Okay. If I wasn't doing that, the opposite of that can sound like beating yourself up every time you get in that cycle of overthinking. So for me, again, perfect example is this podcast episode. Instead of me going like, here I go again, like I overthought, oh, I'm so stupid. Like I know better than that. Why did I do that? Why did I get caught up in that? I go, it's okay to make mistakes. Like I'm not going to be hard on myself for doing that. I'm just going to learn from it next time. So again, self-compassion, 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 so key to validate your feelings. So validate your feelings is number three here, and that's going to help a lot with the anxious thoughts and overthinking. Number four, let's do some practical things. We are going to get out of your head and into your body. I know that because you're like me, we think that we can think our way through anything, that we can problem solve by using our mind. But what did I just say? It gets us caught in a cycle of overthinking. And you're probably very smart. Okay. And you've used that to your advantage a lot of your life. You think that you can just figure it all out. But we are kind of forgetting that there's this rest of our bottom half of our body that is actually super important, that are sending signals to us, and that we can actually use to come out of that cycle of overthinking. So that's why it's number four here, getting out of your head and into your body. So how do we do that? Very simply, we're going to get into the present moment. Okay. Overthinking is mental. So what are we going to do? The opposite of that, we're going to engage in physical activities to reconnect to your body. All we have is the present moment that we're in right now. My favorite ways to do this, to connect to my body. Number one, you guys know I was going to say breath work, right? Like breath work is the only, and I mean that, the only tool that I've found that feels like it literally slows my mind down. I've never had something work for me like breath work works. It is crazy how peaceful and zen I can feel when I do just a few seconds or minutes of breath work. So if you haven't tried breath work yet, I encourage you, or maybe you've tried a different kind of breath work than the breath work I teach. I encourage you to check out episodes 5 and episode 7 of the podcast, where I have free breath work sessions here, perfect for kind of an overthinking mind. Okay. So I love, love, love breath work. And again, we're going to have dozens of breath work sessions inside of the Haven because it's my jam. It's my go-to. All right, another thing that I like to do, a tool that I like to use to get out of my mind and into my body is a body scan. If you've never heard of a body scan, and you can find these free on the internet. Of course, I have one that I created inside of the Haven, but you're just going to essentially focus on each part of your body one by one. I like to listen to something that walks me through this. That's kind of how I like to do this best, but you get to choose. So I usually like to start at the top of the head and just kind of focusing on how my head feels and then slowly moving down part by part of my body all the way to my feet. And so what that does is it takes any attention that we have out here in the space or whatever, and we're coming into our body. We're putting all that attention inward, which is why it can be really helpful. All right, the third tool that I really love for getting out of my head and into my body is another one that I've taught here on the podcast. And that was taught on the episode where I talked about anxiety tools for you to use. That is a really good one. And this tool is 5-4-3-2-1 grounding. So, what we're going to do here is connect to our senses, our five senses. And that helps us bring the focus again inward. Instead of in our head, we actually are feeling our body. So, simplified version, again, I have a longer version here on the podcast, but the simplified version is you're going to notice 5 things that you can see around you, 4 things that you can touch, so kind of picking them up, feeling the texture, 3 things you can hear, just noticing that, 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. Again, I'll walk you through that in the podcast episode, so go check that out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, love. Everyone loves it because it is simple. You can do it anywhere. And it's pretty easy to remember. Okay. So use your senses to connect through that. Another tool that is really simple and most of the time we have this accessible is ice or cold therapy. So this is when maybe you have ice cubes, or for me, like I have a cold water bottle here. And so picking this up can be enough for me to snap out of an anxious moment, or at least snap out of a cycle of overthinking. A lot of my clients that have struggled with panic attacks or high anxiety when doing certain activities like driving or walking into a store, like social anxiety, they really love ice and cold therapy because, again, it takes your mind out of here and into your hand because you're like, wow, this is cold. Sometimes I'll even kind of put it up to my face because a lot of times when I start feeling anxious, I get really hot really fast. So I love to do that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that I have a ton of anxiety hacks, 40 actually, inside of my anxiety hacks cheat sheet. It is on sale for $7. So make sure you grab that because it is a great resource. It explains every single one in detail, not only why it works, but how to do it. So check out that anxiety hacks cheat sheet. If you want some more examples, any type of movement is what we're talking about here. So walking, dancing, doing yoga, whatever you like, these things, again, are going to help us connect to our physical body. Maybe you want to do something a little simpler by hopping in the shower, doing your nails, or even like moving furniture or decor around in your room. That can be really helpful because you're feeling it, right? You're in your body and you're moving, which is really cool. This all takes practice. I don't want you to be like, oh, I tried it one time and it didn't work. I tried breath work and oh my gosh, my mind was still crazy. It is okay. You were training a muscle. Your mind is literally a muscle. So keep practicing over and over. All right, let's talk about the 5th and final step here when you struggle with overthinking, how to stop. And number 5 is to trick your brain with what I call healthy distraction. Okay. A lot of times we think being distracted is a bad thing, but for those of us who struggle with overthinking and being on our mind a lot, there's actually a really healthy way to feel distracted. So again, when we're overthinking, we're not in the present moment. Our mind is on whatever it is up here, that cycle that we're kind of caught in. So I love to do healthy distractions, something that I can focus on, that takes my attention, something that's really fun to shift my focus there. So here's why this works, okay? If you find yourself kind of coming back to those anxious thoughts and overthinking, we're not going to try to just avoid the thought. Okay. Because again, what we focus on expands. If I say not to think about something, that is the first thing your brain is going to think about. Let me give an example. If I say, okay, don't think about a green elephant. What is the first thing that comes to mind? Like a green elephant. and green elephants don't even exist. This is like not even a real thing, much like the made up scenarios that we have in our mind. Okay. So instead, we are not going to avoid the thought. We're not going to say, don't think about that anxious thought. We're going to replace the thought. So we're going to find something fun that does require some focus. Maybe you like to do puzzles, listen to music, do something creative like crafts, coloring, painting, playing an instrument, whatever it is that you like, that is what you're going to do. Maybe you like to turn on the TV and watch a show or binge listen to episodes of a podcast, whatever it is you like, that's what you're going to start doing. Okay. That is healthy distraction. So that is tip number 5 here on the things that you can do to help yourself stop overthinking. Now, I mentioned to you that at the end of the episode, I would talk about a lot of the deeper reasons why you overthink. And that is all of what I'm going to teach you in this masterclass inside of the Haven. So make sure you're in there as soon as those doors open up, because this is the stuff that you truly need to learn. Now, I'm not saying all the other stuff is like worthless, right? It is super important. And if we don't fix this stuff that's kind of at the root of where this overthinking stems from, we're just going to be doing a lot of behavior change on the surface instead of getting to the real root of the problem. Okay. So here are some of the roots of the problem when we're talking about overthinking. It's that you don't trust yourself. Okay. So I want to teach you how to learn to trust yourself. Developing this self trust will truly change your life. I know that is a big statement, but I'm telling you, when you feel it, you know it. Okay. So teaching yourself, like, I trust myself to make the best decision for me. Of course, I know what is best for me, no matter what everybody else says. It doesn't matter. So I teach you how to learn how to tap into your inner knowing, your wisdom, your intuition, that gut feeling that you have. That is one of the most empowering things that you can do for yourself. So, so good. One of my favorite things to teach. Okay. Secondly, one of the deeper reasons you overthink and what you need to learn is how to feel safe. So I talked about how overthinking is often because we don't feel safe, or that we have that kind of safety mechanism turned on to try to protect us. So what we want to learn, and this is one of the biggest things to learn with anxiety, is how to feel safe, being okay with uncertainty. That again, such a good one. I get so excited talking about these things because I'm like, this is what everybody needs to know. It's not just another coping skill or coping mechanism. Like, it truly is getting to the root of it. And this is what can absolutely change how you feel. We're not managing the anxiety, we're healing the anxiety on that root level. Okay. Third thing that you need to learn is self-compassion. I've said this several times in the episode, but this is for my girlies who are really hard on themselves or judge yourselves. And maybe this is because you grew up in an environment where you felt criticized or judged. So you learn to do that to yourself. And sometimes we even do it to other people. Okay. So self-compassion, treating yourself like that best friend who loves you unconditionally, game changer. Okay. Another one here is self-worth. So when you don't feel good enough, nothing you do is ever going to fix that. Okay. You can continue to strive and work for your worth and try to prove yourself all the time. But if you don't feel worthy, that is at the core of what we have to help you feel. Okay. So again, these are the good ones. These are the things that I need every single person on the entire planet to learn. And this is what we teach inside of the Haven. This is what you get to learn with us inside of the Haven for high functioning anxiety. Okay. There is no shame in getting help for overthinking. In fact, I think you're smart for doing that, right? Like, that is the shortcut. That is the fast track to stopping these thought spirals that you can spend hours, days, weeks doing. Okay. And so that's why I say it's a smart thing. It's actually strong to ask for help instead of trying to force your way through and figure it out yourself like you've done your entire life. Somebody else outside of you can look, they can quickly identify the thought traps you're in and the patterns so you can course correct fast. As you've heard me say in this episode, I have definitely struggled with overthinking in the past. I am not ashamed to admit that. I still catch myself when I get in these cycles, but I lean on all of the things I shared in the episode and more. And that is what helps me go, oh, okay, we don't have to do this anymore, right? So, key takeaways here. Not only are we recognizing the pattern, but just having some awareness to when you're getting in that overthinking loop, that is going to be big. Learning to challenge your thoughts and asking yourself, is this thought actually helpful? Okay. Noticing if you are problem solving or if you're kind of getting in that cycle of anxiety. Learning healthy distraction, finding something that puts you in the present moment, connecting to your body, doing things like dancing, a quick walk, or even deep breathing. All these things can help. Then, of course, I talked about how writing it down can be really helpful, grabbing a journal and just dumping all of these things out to clear your mind. Okay. But the biggest thing here is that we have to take action. Overthinking just keeps us stuck. It stops us from moving forward. So I want you today to take one small step forward. My challenge for you, okay, is just try that 5 minutes, right? Try that 5 minutes of awareness. If we go back to step one here, if you notice yourself overthinking in that minute, go, excuse me, go, okay, what can I do from here? I notice that I'm overthinking. What is something that will be helpful? Maybe it's that I do a quick breath work. Maybe it's that I take a little walk. Maybe I go and talk to somebody. I want you to try that challenge today. Like I said, just take 5 minutes, even just once. And I would say you've done it. Okay. Let me know how that works for you. I so hope that today's episode was helpful for you. I hope this is one that you save, come back to, and share with all of your friends, because overthinking does not have to be something you struggle with every single day. I promise this mind can feel so much more clear, way less exhausted, and you can feel like that lighter, happier version of yourself when you're not stuck in that cycle all the time. All right, friend, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye, guys. Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. You don't know how much it means to me. If you'd like more behind the scenes content, inspiration, and daily reminders that encourage and uplift you, follow me on Instagram at HeyErinKimbrel and send me a DM to say hey. If any of the episodes have been super helpful for you, please consider leaving me a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. It helps me so incredibly much, and it allows the podcast to be seen by other people who need it. If you want to learn more from me, head to erinkimbrel.com. That's where you'll find all my free resources, read the podcast show notes, and learn more information about my online coaching and breathwork programs that help you create the life you want. I'm here for you, and I'm always cheering you on. I'll see you next time. I'm Erin Kimbrel, and this is the Empowered and Free Podcast.